All right. Hi, everyone. Today we are here with Terry O'Daniel. And I want to thank you so much, Terry, for joining us today. For those that know you and for those that don't, Terry has a very impressive career spanning years in cybersecurity at some of the world's biggest enterprise companies. So, Terry, I think we can just start with an introduction as to who you are personally and professionally, and then, some brief background on your career journey, how you landed in cyber, and where you're at today.
Thanks, Melissa, and it's great of Due Control to have me here. I guess I'll start by saying, I'm a CISO now, but I never planned to be a CISO. I started out as an engineer, and I worked mostly in infrastructure, operations, platform engineering, things like that. And then I started taking roles in security leadership, thanks to the good fortune of being here in the Silicon Valley. I had some amazing opportunities to work for companies just as they were building out critical pieces of their cyber programs. For example, I helped Salesforce build out their first security risk program and their first customer trust program. I helped Netflix build out security assurance. And then I took on my own CISO roles, including during Instacart in the middle of COVID, which was quite an exciting time, in their ramp up to go IPO. And then I was the head of security at Amplitude, which is a public company, for a couple of years. And I would say that path really taught me both sides of the equation. The frustration of being an engineer with broken tools in the trenches and getting weird, seemingly random questions or demands from the security team about things we had to do, all the way to, on the leadership side, presenting to the audit committee, presenting to the board, helping companies really up-level their security posture and their control environment. So I think what it boils down to is my position is that security leadership isn't about slowing the business down. It's about finding the right guardrails so that the business can move faster in a safer way. And that's what I think where, founders who have the biggest impact on me understand that balance.
Yeah, I love that. No, and I think, like you mentioned, since you do have all those different experiences at those different organizations, you have a very good and unique perspective on how the industry once was and where it's currently at and where it's going. So, that being said, in your experience, how have you seen the role of security leadership evolve from being one of a gatekeeper and a protector to now we're seeing more of a true business enabler?
Yeah, I think the role of CISO as compliance cop, or trying to solve things by rolling out paper policies that really don't apply to the way we do business, I think that era is over for the most part. And I think the most effective CISOs today are ones who can translate business risk into technical controls. Again, we can't just measure ourselves on a perimeter-based defense model. We can't say we blocked a certain number of attacks, we responded to these outages quickly and efficiently. We have to talk about how do we understand the risks of the business, the existential threats to the crown jewels of the business. And then we're risk professionals first and foremost. And risk sounds like a fussy GRC type word, but I think what risk really is resource allocation. We have limited resources. Where do we put them to the most effect to help the business be safer, faster? We can't be the Department of No anymore. We have to be the Department of try this instead.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that brings to mind, we always talk about having a yes, but approach, which kind of, it reminds me of what you just said, where no is not going to work. It's how do you find the workaround to make it work while also still secure and enabling. So, I think our next question is, in terms of what CISOs will need now and in the next couple of years, what do you think the next generation of CISOs need, whether it's skills, mindset, or resources, in order to succeed in years ahead and adapt to the way that the industry and the threat surface is currently going?
I think it depends what we're talking about. Are we talking about how founders help CISOs build the tools that help us succeed? I think that's one. I'll touch on that because I think for me, it's been an evolution. When you're in infrastructure engineering, you don't have that close relationship with your founders. And it took me a little while to come over my reluctance.
Mhm.
But the best relationships I have with founders are outsourcing the building, updating, and maintaining of those tools
Yeah.
that can be force multipliers for my teams. So that's one thing I'd call out is if you're not developing a close relationship with your founders, if you're not understanding what's on the roadmap and why and how it can help you, you're missing out on an incredible opportunity we have in security that some other parts of engineering don't really have. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. And I think, we have to find a way to make resiliency mindset rather than a resistance mindset. And I think the idea of resistance is, you try to stop something or block something from happening. And resiliency is the idea that you can't be everywhere, you can't keep everything up all the time. How can you get it back up quickly? How can you recover from attacks? How can you route around something? I think a resiliency mindset is what we're going to have to adopt, especially in the current evolution of changing technology and the explosion or the AI renaissance we're in the middle of.
Yeah.
I think we have to find ways to be resilient, to not anticipate and say, okay, we blocked these 3 major attack chains, job's done, everyone go home. Instead, we have to understand that technology is once again moving faster than we can encompass all the things. And we have to be resilient and understand how to improve on a daily or hourly basis.
Yeah, I love that. I think, you talk in the first part of that about aligning with the founders and just overall leadership as a whole. And, from your experience in large scale enterprises, I think there's a lot of things that maybe are transferable to newer or modern organizations that are coming out right now, startups, even mid-market companies that have less resources than large enterprises. So, from all that you've learned throughout your career, what are some lessons learned that stand out to you that maybe smaller organizations that are building up their security program can really apply, and some things that they could prioritize?
I think security really struggles with 2 facets, or 2 axes. One is signal to noise ratio. We have now, in a way we didn't before, a lot of tools, and they can give us a lot of signal. Is it a good signal? Is it actionable? Does it really give us insights about what to work on first? That is still a challenge. And I think that is a piece where, again, we can work with our founders, we can build internal tools, et cetera. But it's really about refining that signal to noise ratio, which is really a quality problem. And then on the other side, we have a capacity problem. And I don't think I'm no surprise to anyone in our audience when I say security teams tend to be a little understaffed. Certainly never going to have a 1-to-1 ratio with our developers.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice if we could just have one security person sitting next to a developer and they could do threat modeling live, et cetera, et cetera? That's not going to happen. So how do we find ways to solve that capacity problem that enable us to have a business first mindset? How do we find ways to work with the business so that they understand the value of, as I said, threat modeling? If you've built an application and then you try to do threat modeling at the end and you find a horrible problem with your authentication or authorization, no one's going to have a good time. If you find ways to bring that to the left, if you find ways to make it more relevant for your developers and the product people and your legal team, then you're finding ways to turn it into a business problem. And I think that's where we can succeed, even at small scale. I don't think it takes a ton of resources to build a culture of DevOps, right? And the piece that we can add is DevSecOps. We've already sort of shifted from Agile to a mode where we really practice DevOps, and we expect product verticals to own their stacks and own their apps and services and what have you. Why can't we get a little better about moving security to the left and really inculcating it into that early scale progress? How can we get our product teams to have better questions when they're designing a product or a feature about how it will be used or how it could be misused? Again, I don't think that's a matter of scale or having a large enough team. It's more about a cultural mind shift.
I love that answer. I think one thing you mentioned in the beginning was we have, for the first time, thanks to AI and innovation and all these things, a lot of tools at our fingertips. So just a quick, piggybacking off of what you said, what do you think is a good mindset or some I don't want to say guardrails, but when security teams are kind of, analyzing AI tools, or should we bring this tool into our stack, or should we use this tool to, I don't know, our analytics, our detection, or whatever it might be. Do you find that, sometimes teams think that, oh, the more tools, the better, or is there a happy medium with, manual versus automated, AI tools versus just having your SOC team? So what is your take on that? And, with the influx of AI tools, how do we kind of find that balance?
It's a great question, Melissa. And I'd say there's two facets, and I'll separate the two. One is the tools that we use as a security team, but that's actually a smaller subset. I'd say the bigger challenge is the tools that the business wants to use. And you're right. We always complained a little bit about shadow IT and someone installing a tool that has a freemium approach, or it's inexpensive enough that they can just whip out their credit card and go to town. That's always been a challenge, but to be frank, we never solved it before. And we tried to solve it through guardrails and gates, and you've got to go through this review cycle. And it was always a bit of a game of whack-a-mole. Well, that game is over. Every tool has AI. Every tool wants to do something with your data. And I heard the analogy once that data is like oil. It can power our cars, but it can also spill on the water and cause horrible damage.
Yeah.
And I think
that's so true. I love that.
I don't think we can, I don't think we can stand at the door anymore and just try to keep the hordes out. I think the new model has to be making our concerns relevant to the business in an outcome-oriented view. Saying, that tool has vulnerabilities. That company doesn't have their SOC 2. Okay, but what does that mean? What's the outcome? How can we make a risk-aware decision? We may make a decision as a business that I don't agree with, but if we make it in an eyes-open way, if we don't just shove our tech debt in the closet and say, we'll just don't open that door. Instead, if we say, we're gonna lean into this risk because I think it will help us do something better, faster, beat our competition to market, what have you. I think security has to set up shop and say, we're here to have those discussions. I think the worst thing we can do, and we saw a little sense of this, about a year ago, where security was just sort of saying, no AI, you can't do that. And that didn't happen. And there's a lot of pressure from all the way in the C-suite now. Use AI. Do more with less, go faster. So how can we meet people there? How can we actually find a way to say, don't use this version, use this version. Don't use the free version of this tool, use the paid version. Find ways to make it relevant, because if we talk about the outcomes, then it makes more sense in the business context. And then I'll touch briefly on the security tools themselves. I think we can all be guilty of being a little bit of curmudgeons in the security space. And I know a lot of my fellow security professionals sort of were, a little bit grumpy and said, this AI fad will pass. Well, we were wrong. So it's good to accept that this is the changing reality. And, some of us have been through some of these cycles before, when the move to the public cloud became a real business driver. That's the new reality. How do we adapt to the new reality? How do we take advantage of it? How do we find the points of, boring, repetitive, manual work that no one wants to do, and find a way to automate those? I think it's great to be at the forefront of this revolution in AI. It's scary, but I think the more we ride the wave rather than trying to hold back the ocean, the more successful we will be.
Agreed. I think the outcomes-based approach, I think, is so important, because at least in conversations I'm having, it is kind of that fear where people know they need to implement AI, and so they're rushing to integrate and adopt these tools when they don't really need them 100% of the time. And they're facing pressure to innovate and keep up with the Joneses and, adopt these things that they might not necessarily need. So I think that's great insight. And I agree. I think obviously it's not going anywhere, and it's just the new reality we have to live in. And that being said, there's a safe way to do that. So shifting gears a little bit topic-wise, another conversation that I think is super important to have is showing the business value of these security outcomes, and you kind of touched on this briefly previously in the conversations. In your view and in your experience, how can CISOs translate the value and what the security team is doing into a language that executives, boards, the C-suite can easily understand?
I'm always going to get that question from our board. Wherever I work, it's one of the first questions I hear from the board. What keeps you up at night? What are our top 5 risks? And it's not bad pressure. It forces us to just ruthlessly prioritize. Are there a whole bunch of things we want to get right? Sure. Is there a baseline of failure conditions? Is there a baseline of things we cannot get wrong? Because there's regulatory obligations, there's customer contractual obligations. I think building that baseline first and then building your roadmap on top of that is a good way to do a couple of things. First of all, have a numbers-based conversation with leadership about the resources you need to be successful. If you establish that baseline and you say, this is what it takes for us to keep the lights on, then I think you're going to be more successful about having that conversation. If you just show up and say, I'm understaffed, I don't have enough budget. Okay, but what are the outcomes, right? If I say, if I don't have enough team members in security operations to manage the workload, if one of them gets sick, then you're talking in business outcomes. What could happen then if we don't detect alerts, if we're not able to meet our SLA with a customer? Then you can start getting the resources you need to be successful, and you can start making sense to the business by talking like a business leader and talking about the outcomes you need, just like the actual phrase we use, keep the lights on. I need to pay the electric bill. There are bad outcomes that happen if I don't. I may want more electricity than just the default to do some fun things, but the default is, the failure condition is, I have to pay the electric bill. And sometimes I think we don't talk about that enough, but to be fair, one of the challenges is that we have to be more explicit when we're talking to leaders in the boards about the fact that security is measured on 2 different axes. Maturity, right? How well are we doing at improving our programs? And capability or capacity. Because we can do everything right in terms of building programs and maturing our AppSec and InfoSec programs. And then suddenly there's a horrible incident and we're not able to respond quickly enough. We're not able to do discovery and investigation fast enough. And you can do everything right except getting that piece right, and you're kind of sunk. So tying it back to what are the failure conditions we must succeed at, and then giving people a sense of, it'll take us 2 years to do that. 2 years is too long. If you're not comfortable living with that risk, let me give you an option. We can get more people, more money, whatever, and I can reduce the time. But then you're giving an A/B choice and you're making it a business decision.
No, I think that's super valuable. And it goes into our last question, which is kind of a 2-parter. So I'll do the first part first. We talked a little bit about resilience and kind of how that plays into it and how that should be a big priority. So number 1, why is building resilience more critical than focusing just on prevention alone? Let's start there.
We have talked for a while in security about defense in depth, but I think what we really mean is a successive layer of preventative controls. One lock behind another lock behind another lock, but locks fail. Attackers get through. Sometimes you have insider threat. So I think the good thing about the challenge of this AI revolution we're in is it forces us to confront some things that we've always paid lip service to, but frankly haven't made a bunch of progress on. Zero trust. Sounds good. How many CISOs actually could say, oh yeah, we've done that? I probably zero.
Definitely not.
But if you're in a world where you just don't know, frankly, what your developers are installing on their endpoints, you have pressure from leadership to let the speed of business go faster and to use AI, it forces us to confront those things. And it forces us to take a resilient mindset where rather than saying we're just going to block things, we're going to have that door after door after door, we start from a mindset of, how do I explain to the business what can go wrong? How do I make it non-threatening to the humans? It's a very common conversation that you'll start implementing controls. I tend to work in startups and scale-ups and early public companies, and at some point in that maturity journey, you're going to take away access. You're going to previously everyone had access to everything, and I'm the bad guy who shows up and says, maybe everyone shouldn't have access to everything all the time.
Yeah.
You can break glass and get it when you need it. And there's a human emotional component to that. People feel like, why are you taking something away from me? I think if you have the conversation around it, if you explain, I trust you, Bob, but I don't know if the person logged into the Bob user account is Bob the human.
Yeah.
And what if someone misuses that access? Do you want to get blamed for it? I don't want you to get blamed for it, and I don't want someone to take advantage of that. So it forces us to have that less of a perimeter-based mindset. We're going to have high walls and keep the bad guys out. What if the call is coming from inside the house? What do we do then? And if we have that conversation with the business, it feels less like you're the Department of No, and it feels less like you're taking things away. And I think it becomes more about building that internal resilience, building that sense of not everything works right all the time. How do we quickly recover from that and get back to business?
Yeah, no, I love that analogy. We at Do Control, we say identity is the new perimeter because, to your point, looks like your employee, but obviously it's not. And I think there's one other thing that came to mind when you were talking there is when we talk about identity-based threats and, a compromised account, hacker gets access, whatever it might be, a lot of the tools that detect on those are AI tools. And I think it just brings up the conversation again, where AI can be used for very good things. AI can contextually catch that and risk score employees. And it could say, hey, this is, suspicious activity coming from this employee. It's probably not them. That's just another example of how AI can do so much good. But I think with the fear that's circulating, people don't always recognize that. And I think one thing I always think it's ironic that you fight AI threats with good AI. So it's kind of the good and the bad.
In the same way that attackers could always use scripts to hammer our environment, but now they can do it at scale, faster, 24/7, and never sleep. But on the flip side, could we always scan user accounts for odd behavioral patterns? Sure, it just takes time and money and effort. But now we have the tools to just have an AI agent do that for us 24/7, looking at large volumes of data, et cetera. So it's a double-edged sword, but we don't help ourselves if we don't take advantage of our edge of the sword.
Exactly. So, leading to our last question that kind of ties everything together in a neat bow. With AI tools specifically, and just, other tools, other vendors, things people work with, solutions they bring onto the team. We see a lot of organizations working with fragmented tools, and they have different objectives that they're trying to complete with all these tools. So my question to you is, with so many tools and solutions coming into the fold, with so many different things to protect, data to safeguard, anything that you can think of that you need to protect. So a lot of stuff, right? How can organizations align cloud, SaaS, and legacy systems and tools under one cohesive umbrella to tighten their security strategy and make sure, to the best of their ability, that nothing is slipping through the cracks?
No small questions, huh?
Yeah, it's a big question.
Solve security. Go. I do think we're at the point where we have to take a different approach. I think, sometimes I'll get a question when I'm joining a company or interviewing, how would you build out your security team? And I think the expected response is, I will build an AppSec team, and I'll build an InfoSec team, and I'll build a detection and response team. And you want those skills, you want those skill sets in your bench. I think we have to take a slightly different approach to how we manage these things for a couple of reasons. First of all, everyone needs to be a bit of a generalist in security these days.
Yeah.
We absolutely, I cannot have on a small team one amazing AppSec person and one amazing InfoSec person. Well, what if the InfoSec person is sick and the AppSec person has to cover an incident that's heavily infra oriented? It just doesn't scale that way. I think security teams are not magically going to start getting bigger, maybe bitter, bigger in the era of AI. I think if anything, they're going to get smaller and more focused and more refined. So I think that is good pressure that forces us to do a couple of things. It forces us to think a little less about these made up boundaries between the sub functions within security. And it forces us to be a little bit more generalists and understanding how the business works. How can I meet the business where it is? How do I use my background to contextualize what is going on, what new things come in, and how I use my creativity to come up with new solutions. And to answer your question directly, I think I love a good metric. I love when teams, I join a team and they say, well, we're measuring these things. Great, it's a place to start. But the metrics have to be relevant for the business. And I think the North Star idea behind vulnerability management, for example. If you say we've got X number of dependabot alerts, okay, that's a number. Thanks. Yeah. It doesn't really tell me anything.
Tell you anything, yeah.
A good number, a bad number? Has it been trending in the right direction, the wrong direction? What percentage per month is a good change? So I think we have to have more North Star metrics where we just unify things and say, for example, I have one baseline metric. Our obligations have to be met. If they aren't, we alert on them and we fix them within a certain number of days or hours. That's a useful metric that I can use across everything. And of course, you need individual metrics to roll up into it, but you've got to find a way to make that relevant to the business, because then I can share that sort of metric with leadership or the board. I can say we have to keep the lights on, and 99% of the time we did. We found one issue where the lights went off, and we did a root cause analysis, and we figured how to fix it. That's a conversation I can have with anyone in the business, not just with engineering or within the security team.
I love it. I have so many wheels turning in my mind of things you've said, and I think we're coming up on time now. So I want to thank you so much, Terry, for sharing your expertise with that. I know that I threw a lot at you. But I feel like you were able to give us some really good takeaways, and hopefully our audience found, or I know they found a lot of value in it, because I know I did. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so glad that you got to share today.
Thank you, Melissa. It's been a delight. Thanks for having me.